people were talking about, it's 2017. Are they going to release everything? And they were talking about there's only like 1,000 files to be released, and they were all CIA. And I knew that wasn't true, but I couldn't quite prove it. So went through stuff. There was this guy, Ramon Herrera, who was able to extract the RIF numbers through the JFK online database. So I started with that and then he turned that into an Excel database. And then I took everything that I had from the Assassination Record Review Board listings and put that in there. And you can see sometimes that things, that there are gaps in numbers and series. So I'll just go through some of that. So that's why I went through everything. I have about 300,000 plus RIF numbers. Let me just go through the second slide here. So the review board, you can read this. For the last 2 years or more, I've been creating an Excel database. I can compare. The review board made a document listing of their notice of formal determinations that they published in the Federal Register. But in April of 1998, as the list became quite large and they were winding down, they were going out of business in October of 98, they were allowed to just publish summaries of the Federal Register. But they did actually create lists as they did previously. They just didn't publish them. And they're in the review board's files at National Archives. So I went and got those and put those in as well. So the total number of review board, what I call batches, and I did a review of those on John Kellen's old website, Fair Play, which I'm pleased to say have been resurrected. All those issues, you can find those on the Mary Farrell website. So you can go through those. Here are the dates for the 47 batches. These dates correspond to either the publication date in the Federal Register or when they were intended to be published in the Federal Register. So they're within a few days difference, but there's some dates documented on the list that the review board made. And these are the dates for the 2017 and 2018 releases. You can get those from the National Archives JFK online database, which went down last night for maintenance. Maybe it's back up. And for the first time ever, they scan documents in PDF, and people have been going through those. So those document listings are as part of the documents that they also give you in PDF. So that took a lot of time, and I wound up with over 333,000 RIF numbers. The JFK online database that went down, and in its place, they offered an Excel database of their own, and that has less than half of the RIF numbers that I have. So I'm not going to recite all those numbers, but I want to talk about the first three RIF numbers. If people aren't familiar with the RIF number, it's short for Reader Identification Form, because for the first time, perhaps in archival history, archivists don't generally do what the review board did. They took documents from different intelligence agencies, and they're going to put it all into a collection. Whereas they usually would keep, okay, this is the FBI records, and you would keep them in series like that. So they would bring you out a box, and usually if you went to like a presidential library, you would get a gray box, and within that gray box would be folders, and you would have to go through the entire box to find the document you want. With the Reader Identification Form number, you can go directly to that box and find the specific document you want. So it's a great time saver. And if people use Reader Identification Form numbers for documents, we can all know exactly what document we're talking about, and we can all find it easier. It's a 13-digit code. The first three numbers tell you the agency, the intelligence agency or the congressional agency or presidential library that a document came from. And the second set of numbers, the first 5 digits, will tell you a subject matter, And then the next 5 digits will tell you how many documents on that subject an agency has. So that's the division of the RIF numbers. Most of you are familiar with the bulk of the material coming from the CIA and the FBI and the HSCA, but there are also other agencies that people aren't familiar with. Malcolm Blunt gave me a document from the Assassination Records Review Board that was a listing of how they were going to assign RIF numbers to agencies. And I'll go through that, but I think that was early on in the review board's lifespan, and it was, people need to mute their mics.
But normally the whole screen would be little pictures of everybody. Now, briefly, I saw Dealey.
Yeah, hang on, guys. Can we get everybody to mute their microphones? Yeah, because we're just getting a little bit of feedback there. Thanks very much. Sorry, Joseph, go ahead.
Malcolm Blunt gave me a document from the review board that was early on in the review board being established, and they're trying to assign this 3-digit will go to this intelligence agency. And I think they changed that a little bit from what I have, but I'm going to go through that for you here. Really, the first number we have is for 104, which is for CIA. So I was wondering what existed, like, is there an agency for 000 up to 103? What are those? He had some information for that, but I don't have any documents from these agencies, and I'm not sure if they exist properly. So 100 was Agency for International Development. That's really like a CIA front within the State Department. 101 is the American Red Cross. 102 is the Atomic Energy Commission. 103 was the Bureau of Prisons. 104 was for CIA. We know that 104 was for CIA because we have documents for that. 105, Chief of Naval Operations. 106, Civil Air Patrol. 107, Civil Service Commission. 108, Commission on CIA Activities in the U.S. 109, the DARPA, which you might have heard recently with our wars and back with George W. Bush. 110, the Defense Communication Agency. Let me go through these. 111, the DIA, that's the Defense Intelligence Agency. 112, Defense Investigative Service. 113, Department of Commerce. 114, DOD. 115, Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. 116, Department of Housing and Urban Development. 117, the DOJ. That's Department of Justice, and there are some agencies sometimes within that. This is the Office of Information and Privacy. 118, Department of Labor. 119, Department of State. 120, Department of Interior. This only goes up to 200, so it's not too long, folks. 121, Department of Treasury. 122, Department of Transportation. 123, Federal Aviation Administration. 124, FBI. 125, FCC. 126, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. That's like the insurance for your bank account. 127, Federal Home Loan Bank Board. 128, General Accounting Office. 129, General Services Administration. 130, General Printing Office. That's where our government prints stuff for you guys in Britain. GPO is your mail service, right? So 131, House Committee on Government Operations. 132, House Committee on the Judiciary. 133, House Permanent Select Committee. 134, House Select Committee on Intelligence. 135, House Select Committee on Intelligence. 136, Immigration and Naturalization Service. 137, IRS. 138, Interpol. 139, Library of Congress. 140, NASA. Let's see, 10. 141, NARA. 142, National Labor Relations Board. 143, National Park Service. 144, NSA. 145, NSC. 146, NTSB. That's the National Transportation Safety Board that regulates air traffic. 147, OMB. That's the Office of Management and Budget. 148, ONI, that's Office of Naval Intelligence. 149, Office of Naval Research. 150, Office of Personnel Management. 151, OAS, Organization of American States. 152, Public Health Service. I'm not sure what 153 is. I didn't see an unclosed list that explained what that was. 154, Secret Service. 155, Securities and Exchange Commission. 156, Selective Service. 157, Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. 158, Small Business Administration. 159, Social Security. 160, Subversive Activity Control Board. 161, U.S. Air Force. 162, U.S. Army. 163, Coast Guard. 64, Department of Agriculture. 65, U.S. Information Agency. 66, the Marine Corps. 167, U.S. Marshal Service. 168, the Navy. 169, Postal Service. 170, Veterans Administration. 171, Warren Commission. 172, White House. 173, Naval Investigative Service. 174, Bureau of Medicine and Surgery. 175, the DEA. That's the Drug Enforcement Agency. Oops. What was that? 176, JFK Library. 177, LBJ Library. 178, Gerald Ford Library. 179, Access Staff within NARA is what I think that is. 180, Center for Legislative Archives. But 180 is also the House Select Committee on Assassinations record. So I was wondering if sometimes they change the numbers around as this progressed. 181, Office of Presidential Libraries. 182, DOJ, the Civil Division. 183 is another branch within the Department of Justice. I'm not Office of JP. 184, Department of Justice, Office of Professional Responsibility. 185, NARA. 186, again, DOJ Criminal Division. 187, DOJ Executive Office of U.S. Attorneys. 188, DOJ Civil Rights Division. 189, NARA Legal Services Staff. 190, U.S. Army Counterintelligence Division. 191, DOJ Office of Legal Counsel. Those are the guys who say the president can't be indicted. 192, U.S. Army Information System Command. 193, Department of State Bureau of Diplomatic Security. 194, U.S. Army Investigative Records Depository. 195, Office of the Secretary of Defense. 196, U.S. Customs. 197, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. 198, Office of Secretary of the Army. And that was the end of that list for Malcolm. These are agency codes that I know indeed were used in RIF numbers in the database. 104, CIA. 111, DIA. 117, Department of Justice. 118 was OUSA. Again, I'm not quite sure what that was. 119 were State Department, Bureau of Diplomatic Security and Passport. 121, Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. That's the Church Committee. 124, FBI. Whoops. I'm going ahead of myself here. 124, FBI. 127, U.S. Marine Corps files. But I don't have one Marine Corps document starting with 127 in anything from the national, from NARA's online database, or from anything that the review board published in any of their document listings. There's not one. 135 is the Pike Committee. 136 is INS. Records starting with 137 are IRS tax documents, but they cannot be released without an amendment to existing tax law, section 6103. And there's no rush by anyone who wants to do that. There are quite a number of them, actually. And surprisingly, the first set of 5 numbers after the first 3 numbers, so 137 tells you it's IRS and tax information, but it starts 1005. So notice that 5. So you wonder if there was anything 1001 through 1004, and how many documents are there. It starts with 5, and it goes from 1000 to, if that's 0, if it starts with 0, there are at least 227 documents within that 1005 range. But are there any documents 1000 or 1001, 1002, 3, 4 range, or is there anything 1006 above? All I know is there are at least 227 documents, and you don't know how many pages for each of those 227 documents there are. The records starting with 144 are NSA. The records starting with 145 are NSC. 154, Secret Service. 55, Security and Exchange. 57, Church Committee. 59, Social Security. 165, United States Information Agency. It changed its name, I believe, in 99. 169 is the Postal Service. 172, White House Communication Agency. 173 are ONI. 174 is BMS, which I think is Bethesda Medical, or it might be something else after we check that. 176 are JFK. 177 are LBJ. 178 are Ford. The Ford Presidential Library and the Rockefeller Commission documents are on 178. 179, NARA and Warren Commission stuff. 180, HSCA. 181 is NARA again. 186 is Department of Justice. 187 are Department of Justice U.S. Attorney files. 188 are DOJ Central Index. There are only 2 documents there. And it's basically telling you that documents were destroyed in 1991. So that's all that is. 189, NARA. 191, Department of Justice, Office of Legal Counsel. 192, U.S. Army. 195, Office of the Secretary of Defense. 196, U.S. Customs. 197, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. 198, U.S. Army Califano papers. Califano was a guy in the Pentagon, and he has a lot of interesting records.
I've got one.
Huh?
I've got one.
Yeah. Califano has a really interesting selection of records there.
Yeah.
So Malcolm's document ended at 198. There are others. 201, that's the United States Treasury, Chief Counsel's Office. 2002 are the Joint Chiefs of Staff. 2003 are the Eisenhower Presidential Library. 204. So not 2000. 204 are Senate Internal Security Subcommittee. 205 are the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. That's Bethesda, I would think, medical records and such. 206 is the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. Recently, the CIA released a lot of JFK and LBJ Presidential Foreign Intelligence Advisory Boards. This was a really tough agency to deal with and get these documents released. The Review Board was the first ones to ever get Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board documents released, I believe, in the early 90s. And 207 are President Carter Library documents. I have a listing from an unpublished listing that was going to be in the Federal Register that the Review Board created in April 27th of 1998. And on page 4, they list 4 documents with a 207 number for President Carter Library. But I think that is a mistake, and I think it should be 177. But I have the listing, and I can definitely prove that there was at least this mix-up for that. So 207 might have been meant for something completely different. 208 are Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigation, the McClellan Committee hearings. I have not as yet run into any of those documents. And I'll just read some information I have. When you go through everything, you notice some gaps, and I'll just read these. I don't have a PowerPoint slide for these. These are CIA record series that they don't have anything for, but like before this number and after this number, they have things. So you wonder what happened to them. So it's 104, and then it's 1022, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. That series is as if it didn't exist. It's just completely skipped over. And again, for 31, 32, 34, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. There's nothing. Then to 53, this is all 100. 60, then 10152, and 101, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 90, 91, 197, 198, 199, 200 to 208, not there, 238, not there, 249, 257, 258, 250, 277, 293. I have a large number of these that I could probably give you in an email, but there are a surprising number of things that are just missing that first set of 5 documents they're missing, and you don't know how many documents within that. So these are subject, the intelligence agency and the subject heading numbers that are missing. And I have no idea how many documents they have on this subject, because that's just completely missing. So, and that's true not just for the CIA, but for all the other intelligence agencies I've listed. A lot of them, we don't have either nothing from this intelligence agency, or they never were put in, and the review board dealt with them and they said they had nothing. But I know I could go on for another 10, 15 minutes just on the CIA documents that are missing. And when I say missing, I know that this range existed above and below a number. So I'm wondering why there isn't anything there. So when somebody asks exactly how many more documents should there be or what's left to be released, I can't give a specific exact total number, because I want to say, well, okay, FBI 124-10391. Why don't you have any documents in this one like you have, above and below it or so? And these are some of the things you have to work with. Also, when I was working with the unpublished listing that the review board created that would have gone into the Federal Register, having gone through the 47 batch listings, you'll see, say, for example, there'll be 124 an FBI document, 1037 for the middle 5 numbers, and then we'll go to 319. And then, like in the very last unpublished listing the review board would have, the document number would go up to 918. So I'd have to put in 600 individual RIF numbers into an Excel database, and I'd find that over and over and over again. You would think the series for that intelligence agency, for that subject matter, was only 35 documents. And then you get a notice, if you paid attention to the document listing the review board had, there will be 500, 600, 700 documents within that you didn't know of before. And you just have to go mathematically, because they gave me 35 and now I have 732. So I have to put all these numbers in, because you can't get to 700 and whatever. I mean, you have to have all these documents listing. So we have to try to find all of those and hunt those down. So, and if you were studying any of the things that were released in 2007, 2018, the 2018 release started to redact information that they had already previously released in previous versions of the exact same document. So if there was a guy named John Smith that they didn't want you to know about, in the 2017 release, just even within the previous month, John Smith's name will be there for you to see and read, and it's still there in that version of the document. But then in April, the last release of the very same document, the same RIF number and everything, suddenly they don't want you to know John Smith's name. So they'll black out that name ridiculously, because someone wasn't doing their homework and looking at the previous release of the exact same document. There was a guy, C.W. Wiley, in a record that I had. Well, I'll get back to you on that. Where they did this, it was ridiculous. You just go to the exact month prior, the exact previous release date, and you can. And this happens with a lot of documents, I know. the April 2018 is trying to take the information back and trying to black out or trying to white it out, where you can, well, you still have the 2017 version of the exact same document listed, and everyone can clearly see it. It's just crazy. I don't know that, and I don't know if they're going to be releasing things again, because we really do have to go through all the versions of the exact same document, because in April they're starting to try to claw stuff back. It's just crazy. So how many documents do they still have to release? I don't have a specific number for you. But I do know from all the information I could possibly gather how many RIF numbers there should be. And we can go to them with this list and say, okay, what's the deal? There's a lot still to be declassified. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing for you. I'll try to release my Excel database. I'm withholding that back. Bart has a copy of it because he's scanning Malcolm's documents, and that should help him to say that, okay, I know I have this document, and you could use it like as a checklist, and I've given it to some other researchers, and or to try to use it to try to come up with our best guesstimate as to what they still have to release. So I'll take questions if that wasn't too long.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Joe. I'd like to ask you a question. It's actually a multifaceted question. First of all, can you tell me about, because I came across this, I've came across a few of your messages with Malcolm from back in the 90s while you were also investigating or looking into things of the ARB, and you even visited the ARB
Many times.
Yes. Can you just tell us a bit about that whole period, a little bit about what you gained from that and why you actually did that? And before the ARB and all that, before that all came off, what area were you actually researching before you actually started to get into the ARB?
I really got into it in, I was coming out of college in 91 or so. And that's when we had Oliver Stone's movie JFK came out, I think, in December of 91. In that summer before, we had broadcast in America the extended Men Who Killed Kennedy series, which brought a lot of attention to the issue. And there was the first really JFK assassination conference down in Dallas. It was called the Ask Conference, Ask 91.
Yeah, ASK, yeah.
That was the first one I went to and traveled and met assassination witnesses that were still alive then and visited the sites. And we were going into a presidential election year. And that's the movie led to Congress saying, you know, let's release stuff because you either believe there was a conspiracy and they were withholding documents, or you think there wasn't a conspiracy, and we'll just open up all the documents to show them. They're like, both mindsets I like, because both will get the thing released. And that got the act passed unanimously. Bush signed it into law late in the campaign, October, I think, 26th of 92, and the election was just days away. So he signed it into law, and then it got lost in the presidential transition period, which, though it was a delay, worked in our favor. The act had deadlines in it. It was public law, I think 102-526, if you want to look it up. That created the review board within it, and they had the power to define what an assassination record was. But since they weren't appointed yet, and this was getting lost in the presidential transition, the intelligence agencies themselves defined what an assassination record was, looked at their own stuff, and they released it in August of 93. That was the first real release. And you didn't have a RIF system yet. So the 93 numbers are unique, and they're kind of odd, and they're hard to search. And if you looked at any of those documents, what was released on Monday, you can see that the secret boys and girls were there all weekend long, day and night, on Saturday and Sunday, withdrawing as much documents out of the files as they could. So that was the first release. I went to JFK conferences, and we were given birth to an organization that was going to be housed in Washington, was going to do stuff, but it wasn't doing stuff. So the hell with it, I'm going to find out on my own. So I would drive down to Washington to go to these review board things. They had their offices near K Street, which is where all the lobbying organizations have their stuff. And they were the ARRB, and ironically, across the street was the American Association of Retired People, AARP. So I went down there a lot, and it was a federal building, and they just rented out space on a floor or two, and had their stuff there, because I couldn't trust what was Copa and John Judge to let you just go across the street. You're right there and do stuff. And Judge never went to National Archives too, where all the stuff was being declassified and released, until I dragged him over there. So I got interested and motivated in doing it myself, because I wasn't going to trust other people to do it.
Thanks for sharing that. But then, so the ARB, was access easy? Could you just walk in and say, right, blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, I mean, they held public meetings. They held open meetings to the public. You had to find out about them. You could email them, get on their email list. The open meetings would be public. And again, paying attention to what we call the Federal Register over here, which would all the government agencies, and especially the executive branch, by law have to announce what they're doing and stuff in the Federal Register. So you
Right.
can look that up online and see things, and they held public meetings. But it was, almost like going to an airport. I mean, you had to go through a checkpoint, and nothing like it is today, post 9/11 attacks. But it was just a metal detector, I think, and a security guard, and you just go in. So National Archives is like that. They are more like an airport now. You have to go through things and put your laptop and all your gear through a little scanner and metal detector thing, and like your luggage at the airport. But you can go in there and look at things.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard, I've just been meeting up with Malcolm for the last 2 years a lot, every few months. I'm going again on Monday, actually. Pick more stuff up. He's told me that actually NARA has gotten more frustrating to visit than it used to be. And, I mean, for those that don't know, Malcolm lived less than a mile away from NARA for about 6 months, and went there basically 5 days a week and just go through everything. And what you don't understand is that he said to me, the FBI, there's 300 boxes of material, so you're just looking at yards and yards of paper, basically.
The collection is huge. It's much larger than anyone imagines.
It's unbelievably huge, basically.
That's just the paperwork. The textual division is on the second floor, and if something is on paper, you go through there. There's also a fourth floor that had a vast collection of film and audio tapes, reel-to-reel, different medium formats, had a lot of stuff. They converted a lot of stuff to CDs, and there's just rows and rows and rows and rows of stuff on CD and probably DVD too. But there's a great many things on audio that people don't really know is there.
I know. I need to get hold of Hostie's testimony with the 6.5 minutes that have been suppressed, that have been cut out for national security reasons. And it's a few hours worth of HSCA testimony, and I think it was Schweiker as well, or Church. And he, they had to take that out apparently for some reasons. The audio is, so that was going to be my next question regarding the ARB. What do you know about the films that the ARB actually got hold of? I've just basically realized that the ARB got hold of 2 films that were significant. One of them was I forgot the guy's name. I think his name was Doyle, John Doyle, who shot Oswald in New Orleans when he was handing out the pamphlets of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. That's one of them, and he donated the film to the ARB. The other thing is that the Cooper
The Cooper film.
film all of a sudden came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And the Cooper film is basically shot around the Texas School Book Depository, and no one knew about it until all of a sudden it was. Oh my God!
Well, the Cooper film was actually CBS, a CBS film crew affiliate, filmed a lot of stuff of JFK during the weekend, and that would be culled and edited down for broadcast of what would have just been a typical JFK visit, really, not knowing ahead of time that the assassination was happening. So there's an enormous amount of material that just went into the trash, and some technician saved all that stuff, either that day or probably upon news of the assassination. He probably, we just threw the stuff out, minutes or hours ago. Quick, go get it. And
yeah, Ye said that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not really Dealey Plaza focused. It's JF arrival at like Fort Worth, coming to Fort Worth, leaving Fort Worth, speaking Fort Worth, waving at Fort Worth, and going on. So it's the one interesting piece in it is you'll see JFK reach for Jackie's hand, and they'll hold hands getting out of the car, going towards the plane to leave Fort Worth. That was extremely rare for JFK to do that. JFK and Jackie hold hands. It might be the only time.
Well, Don Cook is another film that was found. The Cook film, the Cooper Cook film. They always get called, either somebody calls it Cooper and the other one calls it Cook film, but it's the film that was basically shot around the Texas School Book Depository, where you see Carolyn Arnold and several other Texas School Book Depositories. They're being shushed away from the entrance because the cops are actually shutting the place down and cordoning it all off as such.
Right.
That footage was brand new that nobody actually had seen before. And the ARB, it was given to the ARB basically.
Right.
It was gifted.
Right.
That's my aim, to get digital copies of those films. Actually, that's my aim.
Right.
Do you know what?
That's probably at the National Archives in the Motion Picture Division, which was on the 4th floor. It might have been moved. There's also a photographic area somewhere, well, probably on the 3rd floor, but it wasn't on the 2nd, wasn't on the 4th. That has an enormous amount of photographic stuff. Because when in the early 90s, Archives 2 was basically built. They were still building it when the review board was created. So like in 94, there's electrical wires hanging from the ceiling and things weren't quite in place yet, and the carpeting and the paint on the wall is still drying, and it's all brand new. So they were bringing stuff over there by the truckload, and they didn't have the staff to go through everything yet. Anne-Marie Kunz-Walko told me she opened up a box and there was a Secret Service copy of the Zapruder film right in a regular file that you would have for paperwork. So they had to, so when some people say things are missing, sometimes that's the case because they want to separate out, as an archivist normally, because the way to preserve it is different. You have to preserve film differently than you would a piece of paper. So that's why they want textual, just in the 2nd floor, and photographs and stuff elsewhere. When stuff was being released, and if you got in there early, you could see photographs of stuff. Once I was there with Malcolm, staying there one summer at his apartment, and we went in there and there was some release, and there were photographs of JFK's visit to Miami, because they were looking at things before Dallas, and they were just, regular Kodak color film shots, 3x5 or whatever or less of that era, and you could just go through them, and they were obviously brand new. The archive staff might have had them for a while, or might not have looked at them at all, but things were brand new coming in there.
Yeah.
Sure, sir.
There's this question that's coming from Ryan. Ryan, do you want to just unmute yourself and just pop that question there? Just talking about any inquiries about the POCs.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you. That was just generally a question, Joseph. I was wondering if, for any of the numbers that you've deemed missing, just based on the sequence that you're not seeing in the based on your RIF search, has there been any inquiries made to any points of contact at NARA about any explanation for why that is or where those might be?
I think I'm the only one who knows that they're missing.
Okay. Okay.
Because no one is as anal retentive about RIF numbers as I am. So I don't think anybody, I know no one has spent the last 2 years going through every blooming piece of information to create an Excel database with all these RIF numbers. So unless you do that hard work, you're not seeing the skips of the numbers. I mean, if you collected the way they were published in the Federal Register, if you have copies of those, you can go look up on the Federal Register online and get the unpublished ones. You would have to go to archives too to get those. But the numbers would occasionally jump around within an intelligence agencies, and they jumped around because I think you're dealing with an intelligence agency and sources and methods, and why this particular subject wanted, the intelligence agency didn't want to reveal this name or didn't want to reveal the source, how they learned this information, and code names for people and aliases and whatnot. So it was less a numerical reason versus the subject and how the intelligence agencies do things. But once the review board started to plow through these things, they wouldn't have to revisit that issue again. And it became a kind of an unwritten review board common law. So that, okay, these assets from this government that we're dealing with in Europe or in Asia or in Cuba or Central America or somewhere, we've already dealt with that with our last meeting. So that starts opening up the doors. So you didn't have to go word by word, document by document. If people are familiar with the House Select Committee on Assassinations final report, they were that obnoxious and fighting tooth and nail every word of how that final report was going to be written and published. The review board didn't do that. So I've yet to present really this information to anyone and say, okay, I can see based on what you have published and made available, there's a RIF number here, then it seems to skip a number. The information I'm giving to you is really brand new. I've never spoken about this before. I've never presented it to anyone before. And we'll work with John Newman and we'll see, why isn't there anything for this number within this intelligence agency? So that this work is brand new and just beginning. I wish I had more information for you, but I mean, it took quite a while just to go through everything and create an Excel database. And now that I have done this, it's a starting point. So we'll see what they have to say as I go through with this. But, I mean,
Joseph.
It's brand new stuff.
Joseph, hi there. I watched a video the other day, and it was a man was interviewing Harold Weisberg, and he had lots of filing cabinets behind him, full of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know what ever happened to his collection?
Yeah, it's at a college nearby. It's Hood College in Maryland. It's the JFK Harold Weisberg archive is available online to search. I believe they've scanned everything. He had a house in Fredericksburg, Maryland, and the basement of his house was just filled with filing cabinets. There must have been 100. And a guy, Gerald McKnight, worked with him and got that stuff, I believe, at Hood College in Maryland. So hopefully everything he had went over there. I remember Ed Sherry telling me Harold in his later years didn't go down there. He was an elderly man. and he would go to bed at 6 p.m. And he just didn't go down there anymore, but he would allow people to come see him and visit him. And I went to him once. I only met him once at his house. Copa gave him some award, and I drove from the conference to his house for the opportunity to see him. His stuff was amazing. And all he could really do was walk down this flight of steps and see everything, because, you know, once you did that, you wanted to spend the rest of your life there reading stuff. And, you know, you couldn't do that. I mean, it was just a quick hello, goodbye, and here's your present. It was nice meeting you. I believe everything is at Hood College, so you can look it up. It's not a great, the search engine for that website that presents this stuff is a bit difficult to navigate through.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I believe everything is there.
I thought it was my introduction to going through huge document collections online, and that was Weisberg. And in 2015, I spent the whole year there, basically every day. I went through everything. I downloaded the entire website as well.
It's an enormous amount of stuff.
I think it was about 30 gigs worth of documents. So maybe 40,
Yeah.
and downloaded it all.
Now Gerald Posner, I believe, once went there, and he may have made things disappear.
No, it's not. It's not Posner. It's
There's some FBI records about Eldon Rudd, I believe, that disappeared. According
right. It's also in Weisberg's archive. There are a few folders that are really interesting to read. One of them is his manuscripts of books that have basically not been released. But on top of that, there's also been some stories like what you just described. But I've also read, basically, because I went through Harry Livingston's archive, and Harry taped all his conversations. So I've got about 300 audio recordings of Harry Livingston. They'll be released hopefully next year. Harry was an utter pain in the ass for fellow researchers, for a lot of them. Either you got along with him or you did not.
Yeah.
And if you did not, he would go mental. In the end, he got banned from conferences as well. Malcolm met him on the corridor of a conference because he wasn't allowed to go in there. So Malcolm started talking to him on the corridor. That's how they got introduced to each other. It was like 92, 93. And Harry taped everything, basically, every phone call. So but you know, the doctors, for instance, I think he spoke to almost everyone. So he had them all on the phone. And so also these calls with Weisberg and with Lifton, because he had a massive feud. But basically, Weisberg said that Livingston had a cop working for him from Baltimore PD. And he used the police computer basically to find out, because this is pre-internet. So he basically found out how people, where they used to live and when they moved house and stuff like that. Now in the police computer, you can find this kind of information. These days on the internet, that's not too difficult to discover. But that back then it was. So he had this cop to do this thing for him. And the cop turned sides and he started working for Lifton. And he went for Lifton to Weisberg's archive. And he basically made some bits disappear as well that came from the basement and didn't come back as such. But there are other stories. I think Posner has also something to do with it. But the thing is, like, he could never really prove it. You know, he had a suspicion because, of course, the documents disappeared, but he never basically caught people red-handed because he trusted people to go down there and basically go through his documentation as such. And then all of a sudden, gone.
He was too ill to go down those steps anymore.
Yeah.
Later years.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so I'm just going to jump in here. Gary, I know you've got a question. Do you want to just go ahead? And I can apologize, didn't know how to get to you.
When I did my Zoom presentation for you guys back in May, even though I used up 2 hours, I don't think I got to this comment. I went to the archives in 2005. And I was actually at a national teachers convention. And by the time I did my duties after 4 or 5 days at the teachers convention in downtown DC, I had about 3 hours. And my wife and I ran up to NARA at the University of Maryland. And 2005, you had to actually get an ID produced on a plastic card.
Yes.
And so we did that. And, you know, they said, what do you want to see? Well, you know, I'm preoccupied with the teachers convention, so I haven't really focused.
Can
Ask for,
can I interrupt for a second? Are you talking about the National Archives in downtown Washington or the National Archives 2 out in College Park, Maryland?
College Park.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so I said, well, give me the trip records for September of 1963 for the Secret Service. So they roll out a cart, and I don't know, it had 5-6 boxes on it. And there were 2 on the top shelf. And my wife, who I was lucky to have along as an English teacher, she's better at reading documents than me. So I was thinking, wow, you know, maybe there's something here. She reaches for the first box, and it just about flipped off the shelf. You know, it should have weighed 10 pounds, 10 pounds.
Right.
So we took it down, opened it up, 1 sheet of paper for September 25th, 1963, withdrawn for national security reasons. The next box, the same thing. So we kind of stopped in our tracks, and I'm not sure we really went through other boxes. It was like we were so taken aback by the fact that these were withdrawn for national security reasons. So I get back to Minneapolis, and Tunheim lives just a few miles from me, and he would come to our JFK study groups. John Tunheim, the ARRB Records
Judge.
Yeah.
and so I go to his office in downtown Minneapolis, his federal judge office, and we start kibitzing. And I said, so what's with these files withdrawn for national security? He says, yeah, you know, he says, I asked for those files 2 weeks before the Secret Service got back to me in 2 weeks, and says, oh, we accidentally destroyed those last week.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that story, I guess, is pretty common now. But so I'd see him a couple more times. And finally he says, well, you know, those records would exist in another place. I said, okay, well, I'd like to see it if you could get it for me. Met him again, and we're leaving his office, and he said, I'm sure we're going to be able to get those trip files for the Secret Service. I said, well, even if you can, why is the NARA file empty? You know, and he said, oh yeah, that's right. As if that was significant, like he had forgotten that they were actually empty. And so I'm not sure he really really has the ability to get to the duplicates if they exist. Anyway, that was, and of course, Joe, you don't know my story from the way I portrayed it in May, but of course it's about my experience in North Dakota with JFK's visit. And I was there that day.
I saw a YouTube video of you talking about that.
Okay. So anyway, I'll just, that was just my experience with, you know, a 3-hour window. And I mean, I could have come away with nothing, but I came away with something that, you know, is definitely something to ponder. And what was going on. Apparently they destroyed all 5 days of those records.
That there was a bit of a kerfuffle about that. People were really annoyed. They wanted Secret Service field trip information for the fall of '63 from the Secret Service. And this was, I believe in '95 this happened. That if you know anything about the archivist profession and the archives world, they have retention schedule for documents, and after a certain time, they routinely do destroy things. And that probably is what happened with the Secret Service documents. Although they were aware of the act, they were aware of the law, they were aware of the review board, they were in communication with each other. These records should not have been destroyed at all. And I think the review board should have gone ballistic about it. If they did, there's a problem. And perhaps Tonheim played this well because you're dealing with so much records and so many other intelligence agencies that if he blew his top about it, they could have come down hard on him and not cooperated at all with him. So he kind of let it go. If you are interested in the subject of planning for the Texas trip, which I'm deeply interested in, and I hope to write a book on that someday, how that started as JFK going to a congressional Albert Thomas dinner. Albert Thomas was dying of cancer and decided just after the November '62 off-year elections where Democrats did well and he won re-election, that he was not going to seek re-election. And he was on an important chairman of a subcommittee in Congress that got NASA going. And JFK and Albert Thomas liked each other a lot. And that was the seed of what became a two-day trip and the assassination and how that evolves. And if you're interested in that theory, that's the fall period of trips. And before Dallas, he went, the Midwest Conservation Tour, if you know about that, where he under the guise of conservation, JFK went to various places in the West. It was really political, hiding re-election campaign, for testing the water, seeing how popular he was and where he was weak. A lot of those records may still exist somewhere, we hope. Bill Kelly, when Clint Hill came out with this Lisa Kubin woman, or McCubbin, or whatever her name is, and wrote a book, suddenly we're aware of Secret Service records. And Bill Kelly was involved. Bill Kelly's a researcher. Folks might know him with COPA. He was able to talk to one of the agents Clint Hill talked with about his book. And we were able to get, some of the Secret Service had their own personal copies of documents. So that may still be a possibility that in the homes of some of these Secret Service agents or some staff or something, these documents might still exist. Or like with the FBI has field offices, and the Secret Service must have field offices around the country. Maybe they might still exist there. But I will remember at the review board when we learned that those records were destroyed. And it's mentioned and explained in a Federal Register notice somewhere in 95 or 96. But and when you go into the National Archives, you're going to see a lot of times document withdrawn and for national security. That's just the NARA playing it safe with these intelligence agencies. And one of the big problems with declassifying documents was not only did you have to correspond and build a relationship between NARA and an intelligence agency, but a CIA document would have information in it from yet another agency. So information came to the CIA from a foreign government or from another U.S. intelligence agency, and that became the third party rule. So even if you got permission from so you have to get, it's like a screenplay or a book, or if you're turning it into a movie, you have to get permission from all these different creators. That's why you're never going to see WKRP in Cincinnati on DVD, because it was a radio station and all this other music was playing in the background. You wouldn't get permission for that. So you had to get permission from the CIA, and you'd have to get permission from a foreign government, and you'd have to get a permission from wherever information in that CIA document, which might be the CIA's version of an FBI document rather than a document created in-house. So,
sure.
So when you see withdrawal from national security, that it might often be the case that there's still negotiations, or were still negotiations going on, not only directly with that intelligence agency that had that document, but with these third party equities, they call them.
Yeah,
And that was
I find
nightmare.
I find it. I mean that's interesting. Vince Palomera says that the night of September 25th, I had seen Kennedy in the morning, and he flew on and stayed in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, after being in Billings, I think,
Yes.
Montana. But Palomera says that night of the 25th is when the White House finally caved and said, "Okay, we'll go to Dallas."
Well, not quite true. In September, there's a lot of talk, and the source is really Conley, that, and one layer of Texas trip planning is what's going on within the state of Texas and John Conley's reelection. And the political scene in Texas at the federal level with Yarborough. And give you some background. When LBJ ran with Kennedy in 60, and they went in 61 and inaugurated in 61, LBJ ran as vice president and still as senator from Texas. So if JFK wasn't elected president, LBJ is still Senate majority leader because he was kept his seat. Texas made a law that forbade LBJ from doing this. So LBJ is tied with Conley's political power base. Conley is fighting for re-election, and Conley, through LBJ, is running a lot of Kennedy's trip, whether Kennedy knows it or not, or wants it or not. Conley has total control of every aspect of the 2-day trip of Kennedy's visit, because Kennedy will bring out crowds and liberals, especially. And liberals did not love John Conley. John Conley was in favor of the poll tax remaining. Conley was quite a conservative. Conley was in charge of Democrats for Nixon when Nixon was president and running for re-election. That's why Conley wound up Secretary of the Treasury under Nixon. There's a lot of shenanigans with Conley going on. So, and there's interesting media reports out of the Kennedy's Midwest Conservation Tour is really fascinating if you look at it. White House announcements are going back and forth. It's not attributed directly to any one person. And there's an announcement in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, about JFK going to Dallas. But it's really already set. He's going for that Albert Thomas congressional dinner to keep Thomas in Congress. It's a testimonial deal for Thomas. He's going to Houston for that. So if he goes to Dallas and the other cities, it would be logical and natural to do it on the 22nd. But Conley has this whole counter narrative that there's all this, it may happen, it may not happen, we haven't made a decision, or it's not determinable yet, we're still doing all this stuff. It's all bullshit. And it's all coming from Conley. It's like the victors write the history. But there are a lot of interesting things going on. Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and specifically, there's a White House announcement. White House sources on Kennedy's conservation tour said the following about the Texas trip. And they go back and forth as to where he'll go and what Texas City and what day. And it's built into the record to confuse you. In actuality, Kennedy's going and Kennedy knows it. But how that one day, one event becomes 2 days and multiple city events, how that evolves into that. And it's deeply tied into Conley not wanting liberal huge turnout, which he could lose the governorship. If he loses the governorship, LBJ is in trouble. If the liberals rise up in power, which they were, could you imagine if Texas was a solid liberal state since 62, 63, 64? There's questions going on in Texas because the vote is being suppressed down in Texas. There should be more congressional districts than there were. There should be more. The real reason Kennedy's going to Texas is the suppression of the vote down there, which is how Conley, is using it and illegally keeping himself really in power. There should have been another congressional district or two back in 1960. And after the Kennedy assassination, it becomes, they create another congressional district. There's a lawsuit going on. George H.W. Bush, running as a Republican, trying to get into the Senate, filed a lawsuit against the Secretary of State of Texas, which was this guy Martin, and also Conley. So there's a lawsuit going on. They're looking at Conley. They're looking at LBJ. There's a number of investigations going on with Bobby Baker and other things. But the conservation tour Kennedy took in the fall of '63 is fascinating, and it ties in with Texas trip planning, and it ties in with his assassination. So Secret Service stuff, I really wish we had the field trip records for that entire trip, and also when he went to Florida. And
Can I just jump in? I sent a document to Tony, which is a letter from Tony. Could you share it full screen for everyone? Is that possible?
Yeah, I shared it in the chat area, but let me share it now on screen.
So basically, this is a hand-delivered letter from July 25, 1995, from the ARB to Mr. Bolron, who's the head of the Secret Service. And this is a letter from,
okay.
This is a letter from Judge Turnheim. So I'll just share that. I scanned this in about 2 or 3 days ago, and just when the subject came up, I thought, hold on a minute, I should share this.
So can you all see it, Bart?
I can.
Oh, good. Okay.
Stop highlighting it. Stop clicking.
Okay. All right. All right.
You scroll a bit further. Thanks.
Scroll down a little. Yeah.
More. Thank you. Stop. Thank you.
Yeah. In 1995, they were in communication with each other. Yeah. And also, the review board had great difficulty with dealing with records from the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI. There was a young woman who was going to be happy to cooperate with the review board, and her superiors found out about it and basically court-martialed her and drummed her out of the Navy.
Yeah.
I forget her name at the moment, but the destruction of these Secret Service records and what happened with ONI are stories that people should be more familiar with the review board's history.
Yeah. I've got some wicked files on ONI, by the way, some really cool files, especially when the name Oswald comes out and the notes they made basically on that particular day when it all happened. They're going to be published soon as well. I thought it was mighty interesting. And on top of that, the what's his name from ONI in California, who at a very early date time stamp of that day on November 22nd already has a full file ready for DPD. And I think by the looks of it, Oswald had only just been arrested, and it's amazing how quick the communications went between the departments. This is one thing that absolutely it's just quite a bombshell, is that within the first few hours, the information regarding Oswald that comes out at the speed within minutes up to hours, basically, everything on Oswald has come out. There's just like there's not much left for as a secret as such regarding his defection, regarding him coming back with a Russian wife and so forth. But yeah, whole thing, well, I just read that and I thought, oh, that's just interesting, because the thing was, when I read Vince Palomara's book, it was they were in talks already about these files, and because even though they were in talks about the files, they still got destroyed anyway. So they found out afterwards, and we're like, no, they've been destroyed. And it was like, well, what do you mean? We've been talking to you about these files to get access to them, and they just basically made a rapid decision to get rid of all the stuff.
Yeah, it's deeply troubling and suspicious, but in the archives world, there's a normal routine to store things for a certain date and a normal routine to destroy them. And, you know, communication may not have been set up with the people who routinely destroy things to say, stop, don't. So it's very troubling that these records were destroyed.
Yeah, Tunheim told me when I asked him, when I got back from DC, he says, you know, the Secret Service was the only agency I requested records from that destroyed knowingly, that I knowingly knew were destroyed based on their response to me.
That's wrong, because from what I've read, the files from Malcolm, FBI files were destroyed as well. They were even destroyed after, before the HSCA came out. There were files. I've got some really old documents that basically state
Well, yeah, I think
case
files,
numbers of people that
I think-
were on a list that would be on the list for the HSCA, but the files were destroyed as such. And there was nothing suspicious about it, because they basically had a policy in place and saying every 15 years we destroy these files, and that's that.
Right.
Unless we're ordered not to.
but I think Tunheim simply meant files that he personally, through the ARB, requested. It was the only agency.
Yeah.
Not that there hadn't been other files destroyed, I think.
In the history of the case, there certainly were FBI records destroyed, but I don't think the FBI was in communication with the review board, and the review board was asking for specific documents that were destroyed regardless during the review board's term. You may have more information about that, but the Secret Service is the only agency I know for certain did destroy records that the review board was explicitly interested in.
Joseph,
Yes.
have you been to the National Archives and handled or seen any of the physical evidence from that?
No.
I
Again,
just,
what you're calling physical evidence, they call artifacts.
yeah.
They're difficult to get access to. With many of them, I think you need some permission from somebody. Like for example, if you wanted to touch the rifle, they probably will say, well, why aren't photographs of it good enough? A lot of the artifacts and like Warren Commission exhibits have been photographed, and it's you have to understand it from an archivist preservation point of view. They don't really want a lot of hands on the artifacts, putting, you know, just the regular, as with COVID, we know how disgusting and germy we really are. And, you know,
And
oils developing on, you know, some of the artifacts and fingerprints, you know, oh, that was this couple who came in from Wisconsin in 1978. And no, you need to, I can understand it from a preservation point of view. If you write a letter to them nicely and explain who you are and exactly what you want to do, they will probably bring it out, and you could put some gloves on.
Probably have to wear some gloves or something.
Look at physical artifacts, and probably, you know, like if you brought in like something to weigh it, if you're interested in how much it weighed, or you wanted to see it for yourself to determine the true color of something, they might bring it out like that. But they generally don't want anyone grabbing and touching the heck out of these things, because they're quite fragile by now.
The reason I'm asking is because I contacted the National Archives in July, okay, and I wanted them to photograph Oswald's alleged revolver, okay. According to the testimony, police officers marked the revolver, okay, and every single photograph that is being released of the revolver, not one mark.
No.
Nah, because
No, I was on the same wavelength as you there, boyo, but I've been rectified because what's his name, who was in crutches on the Paul Bentley.
yeah,
And if you there is a picture that I hadn't seen before, which was in relative high res, and Paul PB, you can see on the near the trigger guard that it was put there. However, they all said that it was on the inside of the gun. So if you say this is the gun, it was all inside this bit. That's where they put their initials, especially in the hand grip as such.
yeah.
So all the pictures weren't showing that angle. And I was like, well, where are these signatures? If these signatures are there. But apparently Paul Bentley put it on the side of the gun, and it was a really good resolution photo. But still, that gun is a Fugazi. It was thrown at Oswald, so that's
I said, I actually asked the person from the archives who I was talking to, and I said, if there was markings on the gun, shouldn't they have been photographed? Because Ruby's gun, the markings are clear, they're there, you can see them. And the woman from the archive says, yes, if there was markings on the inside of the gun, they would have been photographed. So I was like, okay, but I'm still, this was in July, and they've not got back to me since July.
Get used to that.
That's the only reason I was asking, because I'm interested to see if their initials are on the inside of the gun or not. That's the only reason I was asking about the markings on the revolver.
Right. Once this COVID nonsense stops, this damn thing goes away, and they reopen and they're normal. Normal is you write them a letter, and it's going to take months anyway. And if they grant access, you would have to go there in person, and they'd probably bring it out. And I don't know if they'd allow you to touch it or not. They may or they may not, depending upon the condition and what the actual artifact is you want to look at. And you might be able to, bring in your high resolution cameras to take whatever photo you want for a while. At best, I think they'll do that. But
yeah,
that's
Malcolm had the dictaphone. No, Malcolm had the Minox camera. He had the Minox camera.
Yeah.
But it was glued shut. He tried to open it. He says, I don't know what they put in there, but there's a fat chance in hell to open that up. I said, why? He says, it was cemented shut. He says, you just tried to open it up, and they must have super glued it or put some kind of compound glue in there so you could not open the Minox camera as such. Yeah.
I think at one point it was in water and it may have rusted or something.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. If they ever get back to me, I'll let you know how if they send me any pictures or whatever. Because obviously I'm over here. If I was to go and actually look at it physically, I'd have to go to Washington.
Yeah.
So I'll let you know. But as I said, until Bart's just said there that there was an actual marking on the side with a high resolution camera. I've never seen anything from the pictures that I've seen anyway that would indicate it's been marked. But it's an interesting avenue that I just wanted to go down and explore.
Yeah, your best bet is to write them a nice letter, befriend an American here to go in for you with a nice camera and take a photograph of it. But if they allow you to do that, that would be my advice for something. If you wanted to look at a physical artifact. Like that.
I think it's one of the relative easy things to get done at the archives. A pal of mine who lives about 45 minutes away to the west of the archives went 2 or 3 times for me there. And it was nothing but an incredibly frustrating affair, because even though if you have the RIF number, it means absolutely bugger all, because they have to check that with their own cataloging system, and they then have to go and see if it's there and collect it. You're a lot less allowed than you used to. That's what Malcolm told me. You don't get as many boxes as back in the day. And he says it just works really slow. He says, and it's very frustrating. He says it's gotten a lot less fun than it used to be, as such. So I'm looking forward to going. Actually, I mean, I know exactly what I want. So, but
that there again badly now. It is frustrating. You do need a photo ID. You do need to go through a security thing. Once you get, the more information you have in your head, or the more documentation you bring with you, knowing exactly what you want, exactly where it is, exactly what you want to look at. You have the RIF number. And in addition to the RIF number, especially with FBI, there are also agency numbers. If you have, I mean, you can look that up. If you have the RIF number and the FBI, their internal agency number as well, that's very helpful in getting FBI documents, because the FBI documents are often in serial, their own internal numbering system. And there's something called bulkies, which were these big folders. I mean, big, and you flap them over and look at stuff. Yeah, the more information you have, the better chances of success of finding what you want to find.
The best thing would be an accession number. An accession number is the gold ticket inside NARA. And this is what Malcolm has given me, a document that has an accession number in it. He says, it's so golden. I said, what does that mean? He says, basically, you give them that number, they know exactly what floor, which row, this, that, and the other. They don't have to go through their own internal system whatsoever to compare. It's supposed to be there. I said, what was supposed to be there with that accession number? He says, the Warren Commission interviews from Dallas. And it was, yeah, I've got the document. And it says, hold on, let me see if I can find it. Well, bottom line is that the stuff is gone. He says, I've got the accession number. It says exactly what's in there. He says, so you should be able to walk into the archives and say, there you go, that's it. Go and collect it for me. And it's not there. They can't find it. And it's all the interviews. And basically, these are unedited interviews, of course, of all these people that were interviewed in Dallas for the Warren Commission as such. And it's drawers full. Let me just see if I can.
Right.
Okay, listen, what I'm going to do here, guys, just before you're doing that, Bart, is I need to wrap this up because we've only got a certain amount of space on Zoom to store this recording, which is around about an hour, and we've just been over that. So I'm just going to stop the recording here, but we can continue to discuss.
Can I just finish this bit here? Okay.
Yeah, but we're not going to stop the meeting, Bart, okay? But do you want me to keep recording, Bart?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
But basically, it says, this will acknowledge receipt of the 4 cartons of depositions referred to you in your letter of May 21, 1965. Thank you for forwarding the records to us. They will be placed with the other records of the President's Commission on the assassination of President Kennedy. And the accession, this is done by Melvin M. Diggs, and goes to, it's from NARA, and the accession number is 365-121. So basically, they have 4 cartons full of depositions from the people in Dallas of the Warren Commission, sent to Washington. The actual place where it's at is as recorded through the accession number, but it's no. Malcolm has asked 2 or 3 times on his visits, and every time he gets back 0. So the record says it.
There you go.
Speaking of the Warren Commission, Joe, have you been to the LBJ Library at the University of Texas?
No, I don't. I have not been there. I deeply want to go there.
I was there about 4 years ago, and it was laughable. I mean, an unbelievable building, but in the, let's call it the inner sanctum, where the lights and the special effects are on steroids, there is a glass case with lights focused on the Warren Commission report, the 1 volume, as if it is the Holy Grail. I mean, it is so obvious that this is an attempt to legitimate LBJ's involvement as innocent, right? But I've got a picture of it someplace. It was a real knockout.
LBJ Library is a place I definitely would want to spend a great deal of time in. Unfortunately, not as much as been declassified and open to the public as it should be on some things, especially Governor Connolly's records. There's a lot there. I could spend a good year or 2
Yeah.
easily.
Speaking of Hubert Humphrey,
Yeah.
he has archives, of course, at the State Historical Society in Minnesota, and I always mention to people who most benefited from the assassination of the two Kennedys. Well, it has to be Hubert Humphrey in a sense, because not only did he become vice president after the assassination, but then he had the opportunity to run for president when RFK was assassinated in '68. So, you know, it's an interesting way to put it. But when I go into his archives at the Minnesota Historical Society, I get so far, and then I run into the files that you cannot get to because you have to go through the gatekeeper. And I've been turned down a couple of times when I actually file a written request. Amazingly, I found an opponent of his who I believe on my first perusal of his files has all the dirt on Humphrey that Humphrey's trying to hide. And the guy's dead. His name is Peterson, but he was somebody that was in Humphrey's face. And it would be interesting to see how it, because, you know, Humphrey he's an icon of the civil rights movement. And yet in Minneapolis, he was basically, as a 31-year-old, became the mayor of a major city, the youngest ever. But the mob was running Minneapolis. And so he didn't have much choice as to do their bidding. And I'm sure that's a lot of what's hidden. But then how does that interface with LBJ's corrupt machine in Texas?
Well, LBJ picked Humphrey for vice president instead of Kennedy, RFK. So there's a link there. And as far as, you know, troubling looking at those documents, it depends where they're held and how they got them. If there's like a donor deed of gift, that donor could still control the records, even though they're housed in some institution in Minneapolis. And you'll have to get permission from the owner of to look at the documents. And apparently you're having trouble with that. It depends. I mean, it's unfortunate. A lot of government records aren't really under the control and open to the public as they should be. They're public records, but whatever you're talking about, Humphrey records in Minneapolis, it may depend on how they got to that institution and who controls them, rather than NARA or a presidential library.
Sure.
Do you see that Lee Harvey Oswald's Marine Corps manual is being put up for sale?
That's another troubling aspect of the case. How much is winding up on eBay, and not too many people can do a damn thing about it. And also, unfortunately, you're seeing all these photographs of the Secret Service agents, you know, autographing their name to like Alton 6 photograph or whatnot, as though they're a celebrity and it's a movie. And you see those up on eBay all the time too. It's disgusting.
No, we are going to continue this conversation, okay? But I just need to stop this recording. So I just want to go on record to say, Joseph, thank you so much for this. This has been terrific. And you know, I'm looking back on what Sylvia Mara has done and all the researches that we've done to kind of keep this alive. And you are part of that, but all the evidence that you've done. And that PowerPoint presentation is really, really useful as a reference tool. So Joseph, I just want to finish by saying thank you so much for doing this. It's been
Thanks a lot.
terrific. And thanks for what you're doing for all the research community. But I'm going to stop this recording and we can continue having this conversation. So thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you.